The Buddahfield cult was created by a self-proclaimed spiritual leader and prophet known by his followers as Michel and later Andreas. The group was centered around finding spiritual enlightenment from the teachings of the Master Michel. Although at first members fostered a strong sense of family and community as well as love and loyalty for their leader, this eventually all came to an end some 2 decades later when it was revealed that Michel had been sexually abusing male members of the group. The Buddhafield cult is a prime example of a dangerous cult. The Buddhafield cult was centered around searching for spiritual growth and enlightenment. It was community-oriented living that was centered around a master named Michel, who had an intimate connection with God, or so claimed to have, and served as a teacher or master to be followed in order to reach this enlightenment. Community activities were focused greatly on physical well-being, service for others, and practices that seemed to venerate their master Michel. Body image was uniquely important, as Michel made it a priority to keep beautiful people in the group. In terms of spiritual practices, members paid Michel $50 for weekly hypnotherapy sessions called cleansings, meant to foster metaphysical growth. For his finest act, Michel performed what he called the knowing, promising the most intimate connection to God possible, and only privileged disciples were granted the knowing, and no one wanted to leave before they'd experienced it. These special disciples were hand-chosen by Michel himself. If the experience was ineffective, Michel would deflect blame onto the participants. In addition, they often participated in creative pastimes that Michel enjoyed, including elaborate ballets that took time and effort to create sets, costumes, and to choreograph the ballets. Sexuality was actually restricted in the group, as it was claimed to inhibit spiritual growth. Michel was born Jaime Gomez. He came to America with the intention to be a movie star, and he chased fame. His claim to fame was a brief appearance in Rosemary's Baby, and as Buddhafield members later discovered, he starred in gay porn and, according to speculation, studied in the dark arts. Many of his former followers look back and now believe that Michel adopted the role of a lifetime, a self-appointed prophet. He has been commonly described as humorous, charismatic, childlike, and playful. He often sported just Speedos and Ray-Ban sunglasses. This playful and charismatic nature changed as Michel became very paranoid as outsiders became concerned with the nature of the group and with the fate of David Koresh's own spiritual compound in Texas that he closely followed, which was raided by the FBI and in a standoff ending in flames left 76 people dead. These stressors eventually caused him to change his name to Andreas and move the compound from Los Angeles, California to Austin, Texas. Former members say this is where he began to be more self-indulged, and the cult took a different turn, going from focusing on spiritual development and enlightenment to being centered more around venerating Michel, or Andreas. The Buddhafield cult is a prime example of a dangerous cult, fitting all 8 characteristics learned in class. 1. Members were incredibly devoted to loving and protecting their master Michel, leading them to lie on his behalf, and some even to conceal and refuse to believe the abuses he committed against other members. 2, members were exploited and manipulated, as members of the group paid fees for their therapies and were made to believe that Michel was their only hope for enlightenment and safety, as he demonized the outside world. In addition, he also committed acts of sexual abuse on male members. Physical and mental stress or harm were experienced by all members of the group at a certain point in time, specifically the male members who were subjected to sexual abuse, and the group as a whole was subjected to verbal abuse and threats as well as intimidation by Michel. 4, as a leader, Michel was known to be humorous, childlike, and playful. He claimed to have personal experience with God that had given him the knowledge to become a spiritual leader and have a connection to God on earth. This translates to some sort of exclusive knowledge or ability. 5, Michel controlled their communication with the outside world as well as their interpersonal relationships, especially their sexual relationships. They were told that thinking outside thoughts meant they weren't fully in a state of meditation or weren't fully committed to the group, so thinking, or being in their head as it was called, was frowned upon. The members were isolated as they were forced to cut off their relationships to the outside world and were forced to live in the community altogether. Their days include scheduled meditations, physical activity, and more in addition to the required acts of service for their master. These activities were mandatory and strictly controlled and regulated by Michel himself. Finally, there was a culture of reporting, as members were criticized, invalidated, and even ostracized for questioning or leaving the group.
The original group lasted around 22 years until allegations of sexual misconduct and abuse came upon the leader. Additionally, members began separating from the group as Andreas seemed to grow increasingly more self-absorbed and less concerned with the spiritual growth and enlightenment of his followers. Male members of the group began coming out and sharing their experience of abuse at the hands of Michelle, claiming as part of their spiritual growth. Andreas eventually fled to Hawaii, where he gathered a new group of followers. The documentary Holy Hell provided insight into what life was like in the cult. At the time of the film's release, Andreas still maintained a small following. Why did people join? People sought a purpose as well as enlightenment. The strange sense of community and family was appealing to many. Initially, the community was joyous and supportive, attracted to Michelle's message of healing and self-fulfillment. Rape survivors, for example, felt cleansed and lost souls found salvation through Michelle's promise in their newfound family. Some sought to escape society's authoritative decrees or replace drug habits with spiritual highs. Others were tossed out of their homes or contending with trauma or battling disillusionment from their respective religions. Most maintained low-end jobs to pay rent, but they rarely communicated with people who were not part of their roughly 100-member organization. They detached themselves from their connections to the outside world and put themselves wholly into the community. After the release of Holy Hell, this is what Andreas had to say.
We told our parents about the cult, and they couldn't believe how people could follow so devoutly someone so out of the ordinary. However, it is important to consider that they do not know the context of the situation or the ways that Michelle was able to manipulate his followers.